If I could invite the children up, I have a terrific, amazing thing to show you. If I could, for the adults to set up this story I'm going to tell the children. So many times in the gospel, when you hear stories like this one, or Jesus' parable, you kind of think there's good people and bad people in the story. And so you may be tempted to think that in this story, the widow is the good person. She gave all she had, those 2 small coins, and that the rich people who gave in their surplus, that they are the bad people. I don't think that's the point at all. And if you'll allow me, let me see if I can explain to the children what I think the point of this story really is. I have something absolutely amazing. All right? That story, Jesus was watching the treasury, and the treasury was 12 containers where people would put money in. So instead of what we do here, where you pass the basket and people put money in, you would go to this place and you drop money in. But the containers were made of metal, and they were like trumpets, almost looking things. And when you put the money into the container, it would make a little noise because your metal coin would hit the metal container. All right? So it makes sense. If you were rich and you had a whole bag of coins and you dumped them into one of those containers, what would happen? It would make a lot of noise. And then what would happen next? People would turn and look and say, who did that? Who put in all the money? But when the woman, this widow, put in her coins, she put in coins that looked like this. That is a coin from the Roman Empire. So this coin is around 2,000 years old. That is older than I am. All right. So, yeah, I mean, isn't that amazing? This woman had 2 of these, 2 little coins like that. She put them in to the metal container. It made any noise? Not very much, and nobody noticed except Jesus. Jesus saw the people that were rich. He heard them put their big coins in, but Jesus noticed this woman who put these 2 small coins in. And I think that's a terrific lesson, especially for you folks, because sometimes adults don't think you matter because you're just a kid and you can't do anything or something like that. And I just want you to know that even if that happens, and I hope it doesn't, but even if it happens, you need to know that Jesus is always aware of what you're doing, and he likes probably most of what you're doing. In other words, Jesus is the sort of guy that would notice a woman put in 2 small coins into the offering. And that just reminds us that Jesus notices us, even some of the adults who sometimes don't think that they have any talents or something like that. Jesus is just thrilled with anything we can do for him. Okay? You think you can remember that? All right. Hey, we always appreciate your being here. Love you so much. Why don't you head back to your parents? So you see, I really don't think this is a question of, oh, the widow was good. Yay. Rich people, boo. I don't think that's the point of the story at all. I think it is the point of the story. Jesus cares. Jesus notices. He notices the small things we do, even if we think they're crazy small. And in fairness to the people of that day, they would have made a point if they would have said, oh, what's 2 pennies to running the big temple? What difference could it possibly make? Jesus doesn't seem to agree. He thinks that woman did an amazing thing. This story, though, does bring up a second question. And I will admit up front, it's not a comfortable question, but I think it's a question everybody needs to ask of themselves. And that is, well, we got this woman, she gives 2 pennies, not very much, but it's everything she's got. We got these rich people who give all this money, and they're just giving out of their surplus. So is one better than the other? Or to put it differently, how much does the Lord want me to give? That is a question that many people don't ask very much of themselves. They just sort of are, maybe you've been this, you're in the habit of you just come to church and whatever you gave last week, you give this week. You've never really thought about it. what is the Lord asking of you? And I just want to make 2 points about this. 3 maybe. First is, I'm not going to give you a clear answer. It's not my decision. It is your decision. Yours and yours alone. And your decision may be wildly different than the person sitting next to you. As long as you're convinced that that decision has come from the Lord, well then you have made the right decision, no matter how it compares to somebody else. Comparison is not the point. What is the point is, are you doing what the Lord wants of you? The second thing I need to make sure you understand is Father Anthony and I are not doing these 3 weeks where we're talking about stewardship because the parish is short of money. It's not the point of this. And indeed, when you are praying about how much it is you should give, part of that prayer is, how much and to whom should I give it? You would not be the only person who has decided, well, the Lord wants me to give this amount of money, and most of it the Lord wants me to give to this other charity. That may be what the Lord puts on your heart. That's between you and the Lord. I know that the point of stewardship is just simply the Lord wants us to give as we are called to give. Where it goes, that's a separate question. Giving is what matters, what's the thing that is common to all of us. How much? I can give you some guidelines, I guess, for lack of a better word. The Old Testament teaches that you and I should give based on percentages. The simplest way to explain this to you is an example of my own life many, many years ago. If you had stopped me after Mass and said, "May I ask, how much did you put in the offering plate?" I would have told you, I give $20 a week. And if you had said, "What do you think about that? You feeling good about that?" I would have said, yeah, I think $20 is a lot of money. I think I'm doing very well. But it was a homily that I heard, much like the one I'm giving you today, that got me to ask the question, well, what percentage am I actually giving? In other words, $20 sounds like a lot of money. It did back then. But, what percentage am I giving? And so I did the math. I added it up, compared it to my income, and was politely horrified because it wasn't a very big number. In fact, it was a tiny, tiny number. And it was, I was sure, at that point, not what the Lord wanted. This idea of giving by percentage goes back to a time in the Bible when people would give 10% of their crops. In other words, most people, they worked in the land, and that was sort of their equivalent of money. And so they would live off 90% of all they harvested, and they would give the other 10% away in some way. That was the sort of the standard of the day. Please know that in our day and age, I don't know that 10% is operative. I think for some people, a much lower percentage would be what the Lord is calling them to because of their situation. I also know a young man who pretty much, last time he gave me the numbers, he's giving away about 65% of his income. That's because he's got a terrific job and he makes a lot of money and he doesn't need a lot of it, and he feels called to give all that away. That's what the Lord has put on his heart. So this number you're going to come up with, I suspect nobody here, or maybe, it'd be nice, I guess, but I suspect most of us aren't going to be up in the 60% range. Most of us are going to be down in the much lower numbers. But the issue is that the number the Lord put on your heart? You do not want to give out of guilt. St. Paul says it very clearly. The Lord loves a cheerful giver. Whatever you decide on, you need to feel good about this. Not like every time you get to Sunday, here we go again, and you feel like it's a burden to you. The Lord loves a cheerful giver. And so as you pray about this, hopefully what you end up with is a sense of peace. This, I feel, is what the Lord wants me to do. In my case, I tend to work it out in the beginning of the year every year, often when I'm working on taxes, because my brain's with my finances, if you will. And I sort of do, in some small way, take it to prayer, realize what percentage I gave last year, and decide, well, what about this year? Is the Lord calling me to do more, less? Is the Lord calling me to give that money to different places than I did last year? And I sort of try to pray about it and get some sense of, yeah, I think this is what the Lord wants of me. And then whatever that is, then I sort of set up the online giving and all that stuff to match what I've discerned, and then I just do it. And the last thing I just need to tell you about this is that, yeah, I know money is this awkward topic. I think it's awkward sometimes because, frankly, we know we probably ought to be giving a little more than we do, and we don't want to face it. But it doesn't have to be like that. It doesn't have to be like that at all. Because here's the thing that I think you ought to know. I listen to people tell me stories about their life, about their faith life. I've been doing this for years. And I have never, ever heard anybody tell a story about their stewardship and say, oh my word, I wish I had it back. I wish I had not given as much as I did last year or the year before. Nobody's got that story. Anybody who really does this tries to do the best they can with it. And I will admit, it's not always easy. But people who try and work at it a little bit, they've got terrific stories about, no, I started giving and last year I upped my percentage a little bit. I wasn't sure it was going to work. And oh my word, it did work. It seemed like the money was even a little better than it was the year before. They've got stories like that. They got stories about feeling so good, about helping out. They got stories in their heart, much like I think this widow had. She gives 2 pennies, almost nothing. But she must clearly have felt that that's what the Lord called her to do, and she did it with a joyful heart, I'm sure. And indeed, I'm sure she felt terrific about it. It's not about the number. It's not about the size. It is about simply you and I being honest with the Lord. It was like, okay, Lord, you gave me all of this. What is it you want me to do with it? Help me be a good steward. And whatever the Lord puts on your heart, whether that is a tiny little number or if by chance the Lord is encouraging you to do something bigger, well then fine, just do it. Go out in trust, go out in faith, and believe that, yeah, if the Lord wants me to do this, this is going to be good for me, and I will do much good by it, not only for the people who benefit from my gifts, but also for me. Because keep in mind, every time we give, we are fighting that one sin that I think is in all of us, that's sort of that sin of greed. It's not in us big, I hope. We're not like Scrooge McDuck diving into pots of money and things like that. But we need to be careful, and I think the Lord knows that. And so all I can do today is encourage you. Do what the Lord puts on your heart. You just have to start by asking what that is. And trust me, if you can figure it out, whatever the Lord asks, it will be exactly what you should do.